Oh my god, he's running at me already. I wasn't ready for that. Calm down, man. That's good, right, guys? That's pretty good. Right, guys? Look, the bunny's gonna get rolled. The bunny is gonna get absolutely rolled. You ready? We'll get the hydras and we'll get the pixie action. Absolutely rolled, like I said. Like, literally deleted, man. We hit a 1 million little ice spike right there, if you saw it. If we got any hawks in the chat. Hey, what's up, guys? It's Nick2, and today I'll be showing you guys an extremely strong SporeWarden Graveborn build that does absolutely ridiculous damage, taking advantage of some interactions in the game to hit crazy high damage numbers with poison explosions, pretty much one-shotting most bosses. This build has a few different ways to set it up, all of which are super strong, and I'll make sure to cover everything that you guys need to know in the video so you can set it up for yourself. Honestly, it's really nice to have a SporeWarden build that's insanely strong that isn't taking advantage of play the angles, and I'm really excited to show it to you guys. There's going to be some extra gameplay of a Chaos 20 at the end of the video, and if you enjoy the video, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe for videos similar to this one. Alright, so jumping into it, I'm just going to quickly explain how the build actually works and how we're getting so much damage, the different ways that you guys can set it up, and then of course I'll go into the skill tree, class mod, rings, etc, everything that you guys need to know about it so you can set it up for yourself. Luckily, this build, as long as you take advantage of the core interaction here, you can do pretty good damage without having insane gear. Pretty sure you could get up to Chaos 20 literally with just having the enchant on your weapon and having the right weapon. And that would be more than enough just because by default the interaction is so strong, and then getting all the gear is what's going to allow it to scale up to like 3-4 million per hit. But if you just have the baseline gear, you'll be able to do pretty much anything in the game with absolutely no problem at all, and then optimizing it further is just going to allow you to kill things a little bit faster, right, and get that number higher. So in terms of how it actually works, basically what we're doing here is we're taking advantage of the enchant SporeWarden, which is going to, after 10 seconds after activating barrage, gun and ability damage has a 25% chance to cause an explosion, dealing 30% of that damage dealt as poison damage. So this is going to pull from 30% of whatever damage you did with the initial hit. However, this 30% is going to take advantage of all of your modifiers again. So if you have increased damage to poison, increased global damage, etc., it's going to pull from that again, effectively double dipping. What you can do is you can make the poison explosion proc off of a blast gasp, because blast gasp is going to count as ability damage, and blast gasp is also going to double dip from your modifiers in the exact same way. So effectively what happens is you deal damage with an ability, or sorry, with a gun or a spell here to proc blast gasp, and then your blast gasp is then going to have a 25% chance to proc the poison explosion. The blast gasp itself is going to do really high damage because you're scaling your global damage, all the damage that the blast gasp is going to do, etc. And then the poison explosion is going to scale off of the blast gasp damage and then do about triple the blast gasp damage. The main problem that you might see with this is that the consistency may be an issue because blast gasp only has a 20% chance to proc, and then you have to get a 25% chance, a 1 in 4, off of that 20% chance, which is a 1 in 5, so then your likelihood of getting this to actually proc is going to be about 5%. However, what you can do to get around this is using things that proc or do damage instances multiple times so that the likelihood is very high. So if you use a pixie, which counts as a spell when it does damage, this is going to, I have one that shoots multiple projectiles, but you can shoot out 3 pixies at a time, and then each of them are going to shoot 2 shots per second incredibly fast. So then the likelihood of you getting this proc is very, very high. You can do it with a shotgun as well, or alternatively, you can use a spell that has multiple projectiles or that shoots really fast, so then you have a pretty high chance of proccing it. Taking advantage of it that way is going to give you way more consistency and enable you to do a whole bunch more damage because you can do it very consistently and it's going to proc very often, right? There is a version of this where you just use like super high base damage spells and then you just pray to RNG and hope that you get that proc, but that proc has a very low likelihood because then you also want the spell to be a crit, right? So then you're getting in the territory of like it's a 1 in 100 or 1 in 50 chance of you actually getting that proc. There are people, I believe, that have set this up and one-shotted the Maker raid boss with a spell. I haven't seen gameplay of it, nor do I know exactly what they're doing in order to get that much damage, because that is a lot of damage. I imagine there will be some gameplay surfacing of that soon, but the problem with that setup and why I would not recommend it generally is that it is very random based. You have to get very lucky in order for that to happen. And this setup, regardless if you're doing damage with your spells or if you're doing damage with your pixies or whatever, you have a very high likelihood of proccing these things, and that's why I have it set up the way that I do, just for overall consistency's sake. So the main thing that you care about in terms of actually getting this build set up, like I said, you only need a couple things. You could just get a Fear Not Pixie weapon that's going to scale off of both spell damage and companion damage. This is going to deal spell damage, therefore proccing your Blast Gasp, of course, and then you get the enchant here with SporeWarden, and then you just set up your skill tree and you're good to go. This will, you just throw these down and these will just blow everything up. As you can see, mine is Cryo. You could alternatively get a poison one. I'm going to talk about all the gearing in a minute here. I just wanted to explain the core functionality of the build, how it works, and then we'll talk about how we're fully taking advantage of it. In terms of these skills, which is the first thing that I want to get to, actually, let's do the hero stats real quick. You want to max out crit damage and crit chance because you're using your spells here, obviously. But on top of that, your pixies, I believe, pull from the spell crit chance, so that's pretty good. And then you could go into spell cooldown, which is what I like to do, or you could do skill cooldown to have your barrage up more often. Nothing else is all that impactful. I guess you get a ward if you want survivability, but just go crit damage, crit chance. Village Idiot is going to be the best for this. In terms of what you want to spec into your skill tree, so we want to go all the way down into Graveborn to get Blast Gasp and to get Morheim's Blessing here. Morheim's Blessing is pretty good for bosses because it's going to proc your kill skills, and then your kill skills in the form of Harvest or Dark Hydra, then stacking, Faithful Thralls, and then getting Ascension to increase your spell damage, blah blah blah. All of your kill skills are just going to give you a whole bunch of additional damage here, so being able to proc that by just shooting out a whole bunch of spells, and then you get all this extra spell damage, and then potentially, you spawn some Hydras, etc. Look at all the buffs that I have on the bottom of my screen. Proccing all those kill skills is going to be really good so that you just have that available for bosses, but also, of course, you want to be getting Blast Gasp because that is the main functionality of this build. In terms of what else you want, just have Essence Drain for spell cooldown rate, Sanguine Sacrament for more survivability. We're using our spells a lot. I like to use a low cooldown spell, so we're going to have this health regen very often, and that's going to be really solid for us. Dark Hydra, literally just to proc Faithful Thralls. It can also deal ability damage, so it has its own chance to proc things, but the damage is fairly low. Ascension is pretty mandatory for the extra damage. Lord of Edges, extra damage. And then the reason that I'm omitting Dark Pact and Slaying the Souls, I just don't think it's a whole bunch of extra damage, but if you feel like it, you could swap out Sanguine Sacrament for a few extra damage there. Harvest is going to be really good because it is currently bugged, and it's just going to give us a whole bunch of extra bossing potential, but I've set up the build without using Harvest, and you still do insane amounts of damage. This is only going to stack up at the very end of a Chaos Chamber, so you don't really need to worry about taking advantage of it. If you're looking at my Parasite boss kills or whatever, Harvest isn't stacked literally at all there. For your SporeWarden tree, you want to get the companion damage because your pixie is going to count as a companion as well. Any gun damage is not going to benefit it, nor is companion crit chance going to benefit it. I don't really know why it works like this, but that's how it works. We have 5 points into affinity here because that's going to increase our Blast Gasp damage as well as our Poison Explosion. And we have Quiver of Holding. Extra magazine size is actually going to scale how much damage our pixies are going to do, so that's really good. You could put 1 point into Medicinal Mushroom for the survivability, just to res you if you want. I have Windrunner for the movement speed, and then 2 points into Throw of the Hunt, because if you throw down Hydras, they actually, whenever they do damage, it's going to count as gun damage for some reason. So those are going to proc extra companion damage, which will then make your pixies do more damage. This is only really necessary for maximum potential on bosses if you just throw down Hydras, and then you're going to proc this a little bit, but overall not too impactful. And then Wrath of Nature, I don't actually have this spec'd because you literally just don't have enough points to do it. I've tested out going in a couple points into Blast Gasp, ditching Morheims, and putting points in Wrath of Nature. It's not worth it. I actually have Wrath of Nature via a class mod. So getting into the gear, the class mod that I have is fairly important here. I don't know if this is perfect, but I've tested a few different variations, and this is what felt like it was doing the most damage, is having a class mod that's going to give you Wrath of Nature, which is going to give you 54% extra damage whenever you deal ability damage to an enemy, and you're going to be dealing ability damage with your barrage pretty much immediately, but also Blast Gas will proc this as well. 54% damage as a global modifier is going to be really good, but mine is also going to give me all companion damage is converted into poison damage, and enemies damaged by your companions take 20% increased poison damage for 6 seconds. This 20% is going to be pulled multiple times because it's going to count as a global modifier, so this 20% actually ends up being higher than 20% just because of the way that it functions with the double dipping. I've taken this off and I've used a warped paradigm, and that did not seem to benefit me as much. I assume that it has to do with this 20%. Maybe my testing is flawed. You guys can try a warped paradigm and let me know if I'm stupid. Maybe it has something to do with the Wrath of Nature. I don't know, but this is what I'd recommend. You very easily could just use a poison pixie weapon here like I have in my inventory, and then try out a paradigm that doesn't have this and get it to where it increases your ability damage by 50% of your spell damage, or you could get something where when you're standing still you deal 50% increase poison damage or whatever. That would be pretty strong too. You want to get spell damage, all damage dealt. I have max health, which isn't perfect, But you want to get spell damage and all damage dealt here. That's going to be your two best things. You could also get area damage because that's going to work for Blast Gasp and your Poison Explosion. That may be better than the spell damage, but this is just what I have here. I've tested out class items that give you bonus to Blast Gasp and then also give you bonuses to Graveborn power, which in theory should be better because everything is scaling off of your Blast Gasp damage, and getting 5 points into this makes it do 100% of the spell damage dealt. For some reason, it just doesn't seem as good. Wrath of Nature giving you that global modifier just seems to be way better. I figured that it would be better because Graveborn power gives you extra Blast Gasp damage by default, and then also Blast Gasp will just do more damage with you having the points there. But I've been told that the Blast Gasp damage through Graveborn power actually doesn't work right now. I don't know if that's true. Haven't really extensively tested it, but it would make sense and it would line up with why I wasn't doing as much damage as I thought that I would, getting additional Graveborn power. So maybe once that gets fixed, it'll be better to use Blast Gasp there and then stack Warp Paradigm and then stack more spell damage. But regardless, this is what I've been using, and this seems to be really, really good. In terms of your spells here, so the spells is kind of a matter of what you want your setup to be. There's multiple different ways to set it up. Like I said, you can do an all frost damage setup where your spell is going to do a whole bunch of damage and you scale your frost damage really high, and then because your frost damage and your spell damage is so high, your Blast Gasp will then proc off of that, but then the poison itself won't do as much damage because you're scaling frost instead of poison, and you're trying to get the frost Blast Gasp to do more damage. And then you could have more consistency in the form of using spells, and the spells that you'd want to use would just be an Ice Spike here. You could either use a ×3 projectile or a ×2 projectile, or you could just use an Impaling one. Those are pretty good, but I like to use these just for overall consistency's sake. The one that I have here is really nice because the crit chance is high and the cooldown is super low, so I can spam it a ton, and because the crit is pretty good, I have a high likelihood of doing really good damage with my Blast Gasp. However, I just use this regardless with my poison setup because I like to just have the poison explosion do most of the damage, and I like my pixies to do a whole bunch of the damage, and this is kind of just to be extra for just proccing my kill skills, and also it just does a good amount of damage against like badass enemies, etc. If I wanted this build to be absolutely ideal, I would use a Buffmeister, and then this with Zap and Ka-Chow would then scale the spell damage as well as the ability damage that my pixies would be doing, and then my pixies just proc for like 4 million all the time, and then that damage is really crazy. But that's really boring. I'd rather just use the spell just for more fun, but if I wanted to kill the raid bosses even faster, the Buffmeister would be the way to go. Another version of this is literally using exactly what I'm using right now, but instead using the Magic Barrage. This is going to enable you to hit very, very hard, and if you get lucky, you could probably hit for like 12 million with this if you get a crit, etc. I don't like the cooldown on this. I absolutely hate using spells that like charge up. It's also only 1 charge, and it's also only 2 projectiles, so this is like the 1 in 100 chance of getting this to be a crit, plus a Blast Gasp, plus a Poison Explosion, so that's why I don't go for that. But if you want to use a poison skill of your choosing, that's certainly going to do good damage. I just don't like it overall for consistency and just for fun, so this is what I like to use. But again, you could go full frost damage or full poison damage. I'm going full poison damage at the moment. I have a Frenzied Wrath neck with poison damage and Graveborn power with all damage dealt. The gun mag size is not ideal, but it's actually fairly good to increase the damage of my pixies. And then the Frenzied Wrath is good because whenever the Fate Maker or Companion kills an enemy, your companion damage is increased, and if you scale your companion damage, that's going to make your pixies do more damage, and then everything scales off of the initial hit, right? So that's really good. You could also get a Thurge, which will give you additional spell damage whenever your action skill's on cooldown, and that's going to be all the time. And then anytime you use a spell, it's going to reduce your action skill cooldown rate, so you could literally just spam your spell and spam your barrage, and that would be pretty fun. For the rings here, you want spell damage with spell crit and spell crit chance. Action skill cooldown rate is also pretty good here. Getting spell damage is the main thing, is the most important thing here. And then spell crit chance is really, really good so that your spells have a good crit chance, and then the crit damage is also obviously pretty strong there. I have a Cursed Wit overall just for more not for survivability, but just for extra damage because the 100% modifier is going to affect everything. But if you wanted more survivability, I don't have one on me. There's a whole bunch of other shields. Feel free to use whatever you want. You really don't need the extra damage here. You do plenty of damage without it. I'm always just going to try to hit as hard as possible, but you could use something with more survivability. Of course, pretty much already talked about the class item here, so again, feel free to use whatever you enjoy. You could also get one that converts all damage into frost damage and then use a frost spell, and I imagine you could do even more damage because, like I said before, my tinfoil is that the 20% here gets applied multiple times, so you could probably get the frost spell to do a ton of damage there. For the enchants, I have on action skill start increase damage up by 20%, overall very good. And then I have, that's the wrong shield, I meant to be using mine that increases my poison damage by 50% whenever action skill is active. And then when action skill is active, increase elemental damage. And then of course you want the barrage explosion here. Alternatively, you could get one that increases on spellcast, increase global damage by 15%, or on spellcast, increase elemental damage by 20%. Those are pretty good. And of course, depending on what you want to do, if you want to go frost or poison, you would just swap out the poison to a frost one, and then you could swap out the class item, and then you could swap out the necklace here to a frost or a graveborn one. I have the save file in my Discord, so if you guys want to be able to swap around with, feel free to do that, and I have all the gear so you guys can do that. Alright, that should be everything. Here's my myth rank, because people keep asking. I don't put points into it anymore. My character is incredibly ugly, but now I just want to do a chaos run to show you guys that nothing weird is going on and that the damage is really good. I'm going to quit the main menu and then come back in. Alright, so now I just want to show you guys some gameplay of a chaos 20. I'm on intense like always here, and we're just going to run in and do one. I imagine there's probably a better setup for overall mobbing. I like to use the poison setup that I showed you guys that I have equipped just overall for bossing. But I believe if you went the full frost damage route, and you just tried to scale the initial blast gas damage, that would probably be best. But it's not really a poison damage anymore, right? I wanted to make it a poison damage setup, but that would overall probably be better if you're trying to do chaos chambers like super quickly. But for raid bosses, I think that the way that I have it set up is pretty ideal. But obviously you do much more damage with your spells and stuff if it was like full into the frost damage. But again, a lot of it is still random. How much you're going to be able to do if you're getting like procs and stuff like that. But overall, the idea is to have it pretty consistently set up. If you use the shotgun, because it has more pellets, you have a higher likelihood of it proccing everything. So the shotgun is a pretty good option. I don't really like to use it because the reload speed is just like so miserable. If you look here, look how slow it is to reload. But because it's more pellets, it's more than likely going to proc the blast gas there like almost immediately. So it is pretty good. I just don't really like using it because of the reload. But as you can see, it is pretty cool to see it just go and just shoot out a ton of shots all at once. Not a whole lot going on, so I'm probably going to edit until we're on like the good floors and just the bosses. But I just want to show you guys, of course you could load into a Chaos 20 and just run around and do pretty good damage with the setup by default. Spell damage can be pretty good every once in a while. Complaint number 6,000. There needs to be more mobs in here so I can accurately just constantly be hitting enemies, and then you could gauge how good a build is by how fast it clears things. How fast it clears right now is kind of irrelevant, but regardless, it's still pretty fun just throwing out my spells, seeing the pixies do good damage, etc. I imagine the Mushroom Companion actually is going to do pretty good too, because we are scaling some companion damage and poison damage, so I imagine he's having a good time. I doubt our Demi-Lich is really doing much, but he's there, he's here for the Faithful Thralls. That's pretty much it. Floors are always really good for any companion pixie-based setup. I'm just going to throw out a bunch of shotguns instead of the crossbolt one so you guys can see it. The shotguns are usually pretty good here. Just random if you're going to get, you're going to get giga lucky or whatever, but you just clear super fast and then, yeah, see you later, dude. Kind of like this floor. More enemies, and you can kind of do it pretty quickly if you just like rotate like this. But again, I'm just using the shotgun. It's probably overall better for like just doing chaos chambers because more consistency. I really hate the reload speed though. And what can I say? I'm dumb. I'm dumb, and I like seeing the big number. Big number on the screen make build better, right, guys? Right, YouTube gamers. But so you can clear the rooms pretty quickly. We'll snag that elemental damage. Why not? This floor isn't too bad either. Some of them are really boring. I think I just like the open ones / the ones with quartz / any that you can do quickly. probably what my preference is. Don't have another spell cooldown, but look, the cooldown on this spell is so low. That's why I really like using it. But you'd probably do more damage with an impaling one if you wanted to hit like one hit that's really high. You could probably get like a 10 million impaling ice spike, to be honest. I probably should have did that for the gameplay at the beginning of the video, but I just never set it up, so whatever. Alright, we're on the boss here. We don't have our Cursed Wit active or anything, and I think I got incredibly unlucky. Yeah, I didn't get anything. Not a single thing in here is benefiting me. I guess Affinity isn't too bad. Everything else that I got is pretty bad here. So, what you want to do for bosses is, if you want the absolute most damage, is you want to use your Hydra weapon, and then throw it on the floor a bunch to proc Faithful Thralls, whatever else, and then cast spells a few times just to get like Ascension or whatever stacked up. Stack up your Faithful Thralls, and then you want to start throwing your pixies, and then once all your pixies are out, then you can pop your barrage on whatever enemy you're fighting to get Wrath of Nature procced, and then you kind of just start throwing your spells in. She's pretty much already dead. The pixies kind of just destroy her. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the video. If you guys enjoyed, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe. Thank you, thank you. Comment down below if there's any other builds that you guys would like for me to do in the future. 709 isn't too bad. Not really trying to go for a super fast run or anything like that, but still pretty good. Alright, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Peace. Oh, I'll probably make a video on whatever the best weapons are now, so if you guys want to watch that, please let me know down in the comments, because I'm not sure if people actually want a video on that. But if you guys want to know what the best weapons are after the nerfs and everything, and with just updated information, I'll probably make like a top 10 video for that, so let me know. Alright, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys.